Hey guys, welcome back to Colombian Influence. My name is Risa and this is Erica. And today sort of in studio, I guess via Zoom, we have Daria Rottenberk, who also goes by Valentina. And we are going to be interviewing her here soon in just a minute. Erica, if you want to just kind of give us the, Colombian Influence vibes. Like, what are we all about?
Yeah, so Colombian Influence is all about, we have so many things. Not only influence people who are adoptees, but just everyone in the world. I think everyone can benefit from what we talk about and the interviews and just how to understand adoptees. Mainly, we're just kind of trying to mainstream this conversation about adoption using our own experiences as well as others in the community. So we are just excited to have another interview, a Zoom live interview in studio. So this is going to be fun.
Yes. So welcome, Daria/Valentina. Thank you for joining us today.
Yay! It's cool to see. Awesome. I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. So I guess let's just kind of start with, obviously all of our interviews are either adoptees or usually parents of adoptees. That's kind of as far as we've gotten. So Daria is a fellow adoptee like us. So let's just kind of get to know your backstory. If you wouldn't mind just kind of starting with a little bit about yourself, where you were adopted from, where you live now, how old you were when you were adopted.
Okay. So, hey guys, I'm Daria, but I also go by Valentina. I'm adopted from St. Petersburg, Russia. When I was 6 years old, I came over to the States. And I grew up in a small town in Michigan. I was adopted twice, but I also had a mid-family in between. So I went through 2 different families before I found my official family. And then I moved to LA about 4 years ago. So now I live in LA. And maybe about 2 years ago, roughly, I started going on this journey of just connecting to myself and my Russian self and just my story and all that. So yeah, it's been a good journey so far. It's been crazy.
Wow, 6 years old is a lot older than us. We were only a couple months. So do you remember anything being in Russia when you were younger?
Yeah. I have a lot of memories. There are a lot of bad memories, but also at 6 years old and also in the 90s in Russia, it was a really tough time. Mm-hmm. So I think, with most of us adoptees, we all have kind of a rough backstory, hence the adoption, so the memories aren't that great, but I've learned to take the good out of the memories to help me connect to my past and try to kind of put that puzzle together.
Mm-hmm. So you said that it took a few, I guess, families to, find the forever family that you ended up with. I usually hate that term, but I don't really know what else to use in this case. But was that prior to being 6 years old, or was that like starting that process at 6? I'm just curious more about the timeline.
It's so complex, and I'm always trying to find a way to kind of shorten my answer. But I was at 4 years old. I ended up in my first orphanage in Russia. And then from there, I was in 2 more orphanages. So 3 orphanages in Russia. And then in my last orphanage is when I was adopted into my first family, and we did the whole legal process in Russia. And then I came over to the States. It wasn't the healthiest environment for me within that family. So I was with them between 6 and 8. And then I think probably around 7, Child Protective Services was trying to put me into another family. So I was with my mid family, I call them now. Mm-hmm. And then I went back to the first family to kind of try that again, I guess, because they couldn't find a placement for me yet. And then that's when I met, my family, the Rottenberks, and it was just kind of meant to be. And here I am now.
Wow. So were you in Michigan? Were those other families in Michigan, or were you kind of all around the States?
All in Michigan. I don't even know where I was with my mid family. I don't really talk about that too much because it wasn't too long of a time that I connected with them. But yeah, it was all in Michigan within vicinities that I've been to.
Wow.
Yeah. So I always say now, like 3 orphanages, 3 families. And that's like, I just sum it up really quick. So people can be like non-adoptees. It's easier for them to be like, whoa, okay.
Sure.
You know?
Absolutely.
Wow. So I guess with your name being Daria and then Valentina, like, did they keep your name from Russia? Do you have any backstory on that at all?
So I can confirm now, like a lot more, that in Russia, when a child is adopted, they lose their original identity. So my first identifying birth name that was, given to me by my birth parents, Valentina, that name and that identity is completely lost and dropped. And the family that adopts you gives you kind of a new identity and name. So it was changed from Valentina to Daria, actually, in Russian, but they Americanized it more and then called it Daria. And then the nickname of that is Dasha. And then the nickname of Dasha is Dashenka. And then I just found out, because I'm connecting more to my Valentina Russian, birth identity. The nickname of Valentina is Valia. So I go by a lot of different names now by different people as they get to know me. Like some of my Russian adoptee friends call me Dash, which is the shortened nickname for the nickname that I have. It's so much, but I connect to all the names and I appreciate all of them. And I think it's kind of special that people call me what they feel drawn to calling me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's
really
kind of
cool.
similar to you, Risa, because I mean, you can talk about that. If
Yeah,
you'd like.
With me, I mean, I was born Amaranta in Bogota, and then my parents, thankfully, did not keep that as my first name. Can only imagine that probably in Minnesotan schools that I'm trying to pronounce and spell Amaranta. So that is now my middle name. I was given the name Teresa as my first name, and then kind of later in high school, it was kind of just like started evolving and started going by Risa instead. And now sometimes people even shorten it to Reese, and it's like, all right, that's fine. Whatever you kind of feel is right. And, my friends from before then, like in middle school, still call me Teresa. And it's like, that makes sense. That's how you knew me as. And so I get the name thing. I don't think there's as many ways to shorten my name as for you. So yeah, considering the 2 that you have, but yeah, I totally get what that's like.
Well, I also think for me, like Daria is more Americanized of Daria. So I probably gotten even more questions if it was Daria or Valentina growing up, but I still got asked, where are you from? That name is different and unique. And with your birth name, that is kind of similar. It could have been a little bit more triggering or challenging, kind of explaining that all the time,
Right. That's kind of a conversation we had the other day where small talk for adoptees is super loaded because, like you said, people ask like, oh, where's that name from? And it's like, do you have 10 minutes? Like, this is more complicated than the normal person be like, oh, I'm named after my grandmother. That's like all people have. Whereas for us, it's like, well, there's a lot to unpack here. So
it is very loaded small talk. However you said it, that was like perfect way of putting it.
Yeah.
So I guess with your adoptive family, I would say your third family, are you pretty close to them? How did that go with that transition when you were older?
It's been different seasons. I guess to sum it up, like when I was younger and first adopted, I was able to just be a kid. I was 8 when I adopted in that family, and I was able to just kind of fit in. I was the only child, and I fit in really well, and everything was great. And I adjusted pretty well compared to the first family environment. And I was able to they kind of gave me the freedom and the space that I needed to just be myself. And I also, I think, was challenged with, I don't know if you guys are, well, I'm sure you guys are familiar with reactive attachment disorder. So I think most of us have a little bit of that in us at least, but I struggled with that in the first family, and in my family now just made it more easier for me to kind of fit in and not have to, they didn't challenge me very much, if that makes sense. So that was like a really healthy thing. And then as I got older and into my teenagers, it was like okay, we're all teenagers, we're all trying to figure ourselves out and like don't know what we're doing. We're in high school, and identity is a big thing for all of us, but I completely numbed myself down to my whole Russian side. And I was triggered by everything. I don't want to talk about like my name. I don't want to say anything. And I didn't have, they're an amazing family, but they also didn't know to support that adoptee side of myself because they probably didn't know that it was something that I was struggling in because I didn't even know. Sure. We never talked about these things. And yeah, I guess as I got older, I just kind of moved out on my own. I was always independent, just wanted to get out and live my life. And then I slowly realized, especially, I always say now, like it took me moving across the country to California to realize like, wait, my family and all the unfolding and all these things, like I'm really blessed and I'm grateful and I have an amazing family. And, we may have different love languages and, the nurture and nature, we may not have the genetic, connection, but there's things that they did right. And it's brought me closer to them as I got older and as I got deeper into my journey because I was able to look at not just my perspective and all the pain and look into their perspective and kind of put myself in their shoes and learn what adopting was like for them too. It's been a really cool growing experience in that.
For sure. No, we both absolutely get that.
Yes.
That said, what is the setup of your adoptive family? Like, do you know specifically like why your parents adopted? Do you have siblings at all in that family?
Yeah. So my parents, they got married and my mom couldn't have children and they were going to, they're going to just live their life like that. And they were satisfied. And then my dad always tells me like they went on like a cruise or something. And then they realized like, no, we want kids. We want more. It's like a really great exploration that they found.
Right.
But they looked into the adopting, through an agency somewhere in Michigan. And I was just put into the system like by the family, that my first family. And I was kind of a rare immediate action case. And my dad was starting to give up on adopting because it's a really long process for prospective parents to go through. And he said that he went into the agency and he was going to basically just tell them in person, like, hey, we're okay. I think we're just going to take a different route or whatever, or take a break. And the woman, the social worker, I think she handed him a photo of me and was like, well, she is actually, just got in the system. It's kind of a rare immediate case. And he was like, that's it. And it just kind of went from there. And like, I don't even want to cry, but
it's okay. We cry here.
But yeah, he's told me that story. The thing is, like, you don't know until you ask. And I never knew that story until I asked them. So
No, I was like, shoot, we are so suckers for like stories and stuff.
This is like a every single time occurrence.
Yes.
Such a sensitive person. So like,
same. We are too.
It comes out again, I'm like, wait, yeah, it's still sensitive.
For sure. And like bringing it up, it brings those emotions right back into you. So we totally understand that. And it seems like it's meant to be. Like, wow, what a interesting and crazy situation for both sides.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Like, it's just putting all the pieces together and learning of like everyone's perspective is like, it's not just about us and what we've experienced. It's the whole triad as a whole,
Oh, absolutely. That said, with everything that was going on, you had mentioned like in the system, and that sounds to me like it's kind of getting into the foster care side of things, and also kind of the domestic adoption, because initially it sounds as though it was, international, because obviously you came from Russia, but How does that all piece together? I guess this is kind of a more unusual situation that we haven't heard before.
Yeah, I don't even think, I haven't heard of a lot of adoptees being adopted like kind of multiple times within the States from Russia or from a foreign country like that. So it's been really confusing for me to try to understand, but really it just was kind of like a rare case where the family that did adopt me, you know, just was not working out. And we had challenges within each other. And I guess the agency that they went through, that's the agency that they, you know, put me back in or whatever, and just try to kind of pass me off. And yeah, I just went from there. But it is really interesting how that works. It's so confusing too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's definitely a first, at least as far as the interviews that we've had so far, as far as what's kind of gone on. And like you said, it's pretty rare to have people kind of return back into the system, especially after an international adoption.
And that's part of, I actually was just on the phone with my mom kind of talking a little bit more about that. But it's part of the trauma, aside from the other things that were stemmed within that first family, because that age bracket from 6 to 8 is huge. And it's like my first family again, you know, and it was a lot of installations that weren't healthy for me. Aside from that, it's also like now seeing like the paperwork, I was really just kind of tossed over, like, we don't want to deal with her kind of thing. And that's traumatic no matter how old we are, to kind of understanding that.
For sure.
Yeah.
I think a big part of that is also, and you had mentioned prior to us recording, is that you are looking into starting to read The Primal Wound, which is a lot to take in. So read it slow. But when it comes to like how you just described that as being, it doesn't matter what age you are, I think for those who haven't read The Primal Wound, or for people who haven't been adopted and don't really understand the trauma, like you said, it doesn't matter how old you are. I mean, we were 3 months old and there's still a lot there as far as how the trauma really, you know, holds true, you know, physically, mentally, emotionally, in every single way. And so there is no doubt in my mind that what you went through at age, you know, between 6 and 8, obviously that's going to be pretty scarring, considering the fact that it's not, I mean, that'll be more like conscious memory, whereas kind of like the more infant kind of stuff, as far as, you know, what people go through, like when they've been adopted at maybe 3 and under or something, or 2 and under, it's going to be less conscious memory than something that you went through. So, well,
it's funny because I don't know if it's going to show me again, but
yes,
today, so it's really funny. But a lot of the times, actually lately, I've been thinking, like, if I was an infant adoptee, how would I handle my experience? And what I don't know, I just kind of think on that. And I think, like how you said, it's kind of like a subconscious, you kind of don't know as much. And when I was 6, I was so young and a fragile age that I didn't know if because I have more memories than my birth father. I didn't know if he loved me or if he didn't, or if he was a good person or if he wasn't. Like, I was so young, I couldn't comprehend what was going on. I didn't know the full story. I didn't know what actually happened during that time. And I feel like if I was an infant adoptee, it would be harder for me because I have no memories to even go off of. But I also think it's like both are just as hard. Like, age bracket, it's hard regardless. It's challenging, but it's worth doing the work, you know, and healing and going on this journey.
Right. Absolutely. So I guess I'm just super curious because you just went back to Russia. So do you want to like tell us all about that? How did you feel like going up to the time you left? What were your emotions? Why were you going there? You know, obviously to kind of just go back to your roots and kind of where you were from, but did something drive you to do this more at this time than before, or kind of what was the whole backstory on that?
So I'm able to speak on it now a little bit more, but not in full depth. But I have this show, and I have a friend that introduced me to this show that he's working on, and he's a Russian New Zealand adoptee, and I started connecting with him just as an adoptee and wanting to know more of my past and my journey and my story. And basically I got invited to be a part of this docu-series show called Reunited. And, during the pandemic, before the pandemic, we started like filming a little bit more on my journey here in the States. And then the next step was to go back to Russia. So it was the show, but it was also me being there and connecting to my roots and myself and my story and my memories. And I think the main thing for me was connecting to my memories, because it almost was like a past life for me. And it was I was such a fragile age where I didn't know like if these things really happened, or did this place look like this, or was this person that I thought it was, in the order of events. Oh, I'm sorry.
No worries.
You can dance to it.
You'll get calls if you're on Do Not Disturb.
No worries.
Sorry, guys.
You're fine. You're fine. You're popular.
No, I'm not. The thing for me was just connecting to my memories and kind of not second guessing that within myself and validating myself. And I was able to do that. And not everything quite yet. It'll take more times to go back and kind of unravel more pieces. You can only do so much. But yeah, it was really fulfilling. And I'd like to say I gained a little bit more confidence from it, just knowing that every memory that I have is accurate. And that is like just the craziest feeling. It's also, not only is it beautiful, but it's also the other end of it is like, oh, dang, that actually did happen. Or that was how I felt. Or it was kind of, it's been hard to process since I've been back, just because it's so much contrast. But overall, it was something that I needed to do, and that's why I did it. And I lately kind of have been wanting to tell my story more. So it was a really fortunate thing that I was able to do that with the show. So,
wow.
Yeah.
And to have that documented is everything. Because when I went back, I didn't document anything. And it's almost like I blacked out during it. Like you just...
Which I can imagine.
There's so many emotions and so many things. So to have that series, that's amazing. I can't even... I'm jealous, to be honest. Like, I wish I could go back and redo that. But at that time, I was 18. So... That was what?
And that's probably the last thing you would be thinking about, too. It's just like, I need to take a picture of this and this and this. Like, if I'm in a moment where I'm just enjoying myself or something, that is the last thing that I'm going to document on, like, Instagram or something. It's just because I'm enjoying the moment. And then something like that, because you were there in Colombia for how long?
12 days.
12 days. And Daria, what about you? How long were you in Russia?
Oh, man. I was in Russia for 10 days. And
yeah.
I'm kicking myself about it. I wish it was longer. I really wish it was longer. As soon as I started getting comfortable being there,
of course,
I left to go back to the States. So it was a culture shock, and it was really depressing, and it still is, to be honest. Like being back here when I did so much to my Russian side.
Yeah. Absolutely, I can imagine that's a lot to process, both just while you're there, and especially while you're back. And I think especially just knowing now, I mean, now we know that, because I've never been back to Colombia, and that's something that we really want to do together at some point. And I think now we know it should be, at least 2 weeks, so that we can go and actually experience it. Because like you said, any international travel, you get comfortable and then you leave. So yeah.
Definitely. I regret not being there longer, but I do want to go back every summer and winter if I can. So I'd like to go back in the winter time. But as you said with filming, it was really challenging, because it's in the moment, but it's also so vulnerable and it's so hard.
Oh gosh, I can't even imagine.
And then, I'm kind of in the industry myself, acting, modeling. So it's hard to turn things on and off because I do it naturally, but it was just challenging for me. It was really, really challenging, but it is a blessing to have that. I don't know how it's going to come out, but it's going to be great. It is what it is. It's my story. But all the different steps to it. And I'm a naturally like emotional, sensitive person. So everything is so deep to me. And before I went, I just was like 2 days before I started like actually feeling like, whoa, this is about to happen. Like I was terrified. I was so scared. And then when I was there, I, certain things that I can't share yet, but certain events happened that I was really, really freaked out and really nervous and anxious. And you're physically there. And I didn't know how to process while I was there, but I had to just do it. I'm there and you have to do what you have to do. But then since I've been home here in the States, it's like, okay, well now I get time to sit down and process and I want to, but the thing is, I don't know how to. I don't even know where to start. So that's been the most challenging thing for me is like, I don't know how. I want to, but I don't know how.
Right.
That's a really good point too. I think for me, I was just thinking back then it was 10 years ago, Instagram and stuff like that wasn't even really super popping at that time. So I think vlogging and things like that, it wasn't even coming across in my mind.
I was going to say it probably didn't even.
Yeah. And so I don't know. For me, it was more, I think I'd write about it. But I think if yours is taking pictures and like maybe thinking about, how did that make me feel in that time? Just different ways to process it that way. I don't know. It's something that you're just going to eventually figure out, but it took me a while after I got back to feel fully comfortable with it. Even to this day, it's like, wow, I can't believe I did that. Or how does that make me feel now? I'm still kind of processing through it. What do I do now that I know my birth mom? All of those things. I thought it was going to close all of those chapters, but yet it kind of opens a little bit more.
Yes. It does. I knew that I think a lot of, I guess the stigma or the idea behind going back to like a birth country or just kind of reconnecting to our roots and our story, it's either for closure or it's for a new chapter. And I knew it was not going to be closure. I knew it was going to be a brand new chapter. I just knew it. And it is. So it's very confusing. It's very complex. There's things that, you can't be fully satisfied in your story. There's pain, there's trauma there still. But overall, I'm really grateful and blessed and like overjoyed with me going back and what I experienced there. And I'm excited to share it.
Yeah.
So do you know when that will come out?
I think I don't know yet. I think they're just now starting to kind of wrap things up and start working on all the stories, like filming wise and stuff, but I'm not sure yet, actually.
That's so exciting. Well, everyone listening, just know there's going to be a part 2 once that's out, so we can kind of go in full detail with her. We're just excited to keep this journey and connection with you throughout this, because I know it's a lot to process, and we're always here for you also. So definitely reach out anytime.
Yay.
Let's see. So I'm trying to figure out where we're at. So I think from what we've seen on your Instagram, there's some other groups and everything, and like I'm adopted .org that you're in association with. What can you tell us about those groups and kind of just your role in all of that?
Yeah, I'm adopted organization / charity. I found this maybe 2 years ago or so. And this is when I was like really starting to want to be more curious on my journey and wanting to be more consistent in doing the work. And I just remember I Googled, how do I find my Russian family? I mean, it's just the silliest thing, right? But it's like, that's all we can do. And I found this, the website, and then I found the the Instagram, and then I found the founder, Alex, and I basically just, reached out. We started connecting, and it just kind of went from there that I became kind of like a team member or ambassador, really just an advocate for other adoptees. And I really like to, connect with other Russian adoptees, any adoptee that wants to connect in general. I think it's just so important to do that. And there's a sense of community when you're able to do it, because for me, it's not easy to do it constantly all the time.
Oh, of course, we get that.
It can be overwhelming sometimes, but it is important and to find people within that community that you can connect to and share stories and kind of give each other validation and voices and similar experiences. So really just my part in I'm Adopted is just kind of working with Alex and helping share those stories and advocate for other adoptees, and especially with the experience with my Russian American, adoption side of things and experiencing getting my citizenship in Russia again, and then getting the passport and then going back to Russia and like sharing my journey. That's really, I'm just trying to advocate for all adoptees, but also Russian adoptees to know what the process is like when they're ready, and if they're ready,
Mm-hmm.
So I just try to share as much as I can, and that's really my involvement.
I think with what you said also in regards to just kind of being able to advocate specifically also for Russian adoptees, we have definitely found that domestic versus international is super, super different. And then when it comes to the international sector, as far as every single different country, it's also incredibly different.
Yes, it is. And that's, it's so many layers to it.
Mm-hmm.
And with me, I can connect to any adoptee across the board, any layer. It's who you connect to as a person. Because I've met, some Russian adoptees where it's just like, I try so hard because we have this connection, but really we don't. And it's okay. And you connect who you connect with. But I always at least try with any adoptee. And then the next layer is the Russian adoptee. And then the next layer is who is on a journey as well, and who wants to connect, or who's reunited or who hasn't. And there's just so many layers to it that you can continue to connect with everybody. Now I'm forgetting where I'm getting at with that, but yeah.
And you talked about citizenship and passports to go back. Was that a long journey for you?
I feel like for Russia, that would be very complicated.
Yes, it's really complicated and it's really traumatic. I'm not going to lie. Like I said, like in Russia, we get our first identity dropped. So my double adoption, it was really challenging because in Russia, I'm known as my first adoptive name, my first name, Daria, and then my first adoptive last name, which I'm not going to give away, but I've learned to kind of not really share that too much. But so I'm known as that name. And obviously here in the States, I'm Daria Rottenberk, which is my adopted family now. And in Russia, obviously, there's no paperwork that shows, adopted here and then here and then here, like name changes. No, it's not there. So when I went to like apply for my passport and I physically flew to like Washington, D.C. and do this, it was so triggering and traumatic because it took me going back and forth from the embassy within like an hour time slot before they closed. I went in and they're like, well, you don't have everything. You can't do it. And I'm like bawling my eyes out. I'm like, well, you guys, I flew all the way here. What do you mean I don't have everything? You guys should have told me. And basically they didn't know how to tell me that I didn't have anything to show my adopted name that's known in Russia to who I'm linked to now. But then I found out just to reapply under my first adoptive last name in Russia. So I have two different aliases, name in Russia and a different name here. And to get the process or to go through the process to merge it together is a whole nother level to it. And it's very confusing and it would take a lot of time and energy and money. And that could be triggering too. And right now I'm not going to do that, but I definitely cried when I signed off on the paperwork to release passport in Russia to renew under that name that I'm not anymore. It was hard, but I knew I had to do it to connect the dots in Russia, because that's what I'm known as in Russia.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. It's a lot.
It is.
And I appreciate talking about it with other adoptees, and especially other Russian adoptees that have gone through it already, because they get it, and I don't have to share everything. But just a few days ago, I met with another younger Russian adoptee who is interested in going on their journey and going back to their roots. And we just kind of, got to know each other more, and they were asking me questions since they knew I just went back. And I think just me helping people understand that it's a process. Like, if I can share that, like my experience, everyone is going to have a different story and process and path to get to their journey. But if I can at least share what I experienced, it could be similar to what they may need to prepare for.
Yes.
I think a lot of people think that it's just an easy process. I'll get my passport and go. It's a lot. And there's a lot of emotional things that you don't know about until they come up. So yeah, that's what I experienced in my journey all across.
And just being someone who people can reach out to, I think that's super important, because with Colombia, I had to go to Chicago to get my passport renewed, and I don't speak Spanish. So doing that, and they only spoke Spanish and they didn't understand why I didn't, oh, you're Colombian, why don't you speak Spanish? I'm trying to explain this to you, but I can't speak, it's just very difficult. And those are things people don't understand either. It's not just you fly there and it's all happy and easy. Especially when you're born there, it's a big process. So I'm glad I'm not alone in that, but yours is a little bit more complex.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a language barrier, and it's really hard and challenging. And I was freaked out about the two different names. Is Russia going to accept me back when I land? Because I have two different, I have this name and then I have this name, and I look super Russian in this photo, super American in this photo. They're going to think I'm doing something sketchy,
Right.
It's just, what is the funniest part about that is all my nerves. It was easier for me to get into Russia and go through customs than it was for me to fly out of the US. They asked me more questions.
Not even surprised.
It's when I checked into my flight, they were like, why are you this? Why are you that? Why don't you speak Russian? Because I was about to fly on a Russian flight. And they just somewhat interrogated me, and I'm like, well, I adopted twice. This is my legal paperwork here, my legal name here. And I know I go through these challenges, which they're so hard, but at the same time, I know it's for a greater good and purpose for other people that may experience that. And these things need to be changed. These laws need to be had easier and make it okay for people to go back to their birth country and connect. In Russia, it's hard to explain. It's kind of looked down upon in the culture. Why would adoptees want to come back? Why would they want to come back? And reconnect to trauma. You know what I mean? So it'll be really good to hopefully start paving the way of changing that idea.
Right. I think there's a lot of work that's being done by adoptees, in this, era of technology where we have the ability to, produce this kind of content and just be able to talk about it. Our podcast was started with one mic that we shared and one laptop, and it was we want to do this, just for, like you said, the greater good, and just to be able to get this information out there. And I feel like this is the way for adoptees, especially, to shine and finally get the information out, because it's, a group of people that exist everywhere that a lot of people don't even realize. And it's, just as common as, just about every other person. And it's there's a lot of us. And I think there's a lot that hasn't been said that needs to be said and that needs to be understood. So
And I think there's no guide either. Like, I didn't know I had to go through all of that to go back to my birth country. I thought it was going to be easy. And I'm adopted, and people who aren't adopted, they really don't understand. So I wish there was more of that. But again, we are being that now.
Yeah.
It's also like, for me, I've been kind of triggered more lately since I've been back. I think as I share my story, people probably think I'm just always open to talking about it, and that's not the case.
Yes.
And with that person that I just mentioned that we connected as Russian adoptees, and they're younger, we were out at like an event, 4th of July, and I was really triggered because I know people, they're good intended, but they just may be ignorant and just don't understand and don't know. And I am challenged with that lately because I'm still trying to process everything so much that it's hard for me to like talk about it to everybody when I don't even know how to express it. But it was just funny. Like the comment was, oh, you guys are both Russian adoptees. Are you guys like, you guys have the same parents? Like, it's the assumption is like wild to me. But it just shows me just how far-fetched of the information and understanding it is for others to, they just don't know any better, and
it's really just like the full concept of adoption is lost on people, which like, that's a really big concept to lose.
Yes.
And especially in that case with that specific situation, like, oh, you're both Russian adoptees, a massive country. It's like, are you related? It's like, well, okay, both of you are from this state. Are you related? It's the same kind of thing, like twisting it to the other side. Does this make any sense?
Shows that they, not them, but it just shows that others that are non-adopted really just don't know the adoption side and journey, adoption journey. Just maybe assume like, oh, well, then you guys are all just related. And it's like, whoa, it's just so far-fetched.
Exactly.
Yeah. Wow. But it's, the good side of that is like, it's our job if we want to, and we're doing the work. And by doing this and spreading our journeys and our stories and our voices.
Yes. And I think it's really important. The more I'm doing it, the more I'm just realizing, wow, like a lot of these people connect with us that never had anybody. We didn't have anybody before we met each other.
Exactly.
That really could connect how we do. And so it's really important. And I'm just happy that you're doing that for Russian people, because we can't do that. I mean, Russian adoptees, and
it's obviously very different than the experience that we had. So it's, good that people can like take their,
experience and
take their experience. Yeah. Yeah.
I want to ask you guys what made you guys want to, I guess, have this interview with a Russian adoptee?
Well, we are always trying to really just expand upon what kind of adoptees that we can talk to, because although, our title is Colombian influence, the true meaning behind that is just that our Colombian side can, have that influence on our story. And that's really all that it is. It's not specifically just Colombian adoptees. It's not, any type of specific thing in that way. But it's more so just making sure, like, most of our interviews are generally around the same process to a certain extent, like as far as the questions that we ask, because we want to make sure that people are getting their stories out and making sure that people do see the different sides of what types of adoption there are. So, we've talked to plenty of, domestic adoptions, interracial, plenty of international adoptions, and they're all different. They're all so different. And even though we're from the same place, literally the same orphanage in Bogota, Colombia, it's like we still have a very, very different story. And that's really the true purpose behind this, and how we kind of ended up coming up with this interview process when we talk to different adoptees, is that generally a lot of it is that from our end is about the same, but it's because there are so many specific things that we want to hear from people from different countries.
Yeah, exactly. And also, like, for me, I just love hearing other adoptee stories, no matter what background it is or what layer or level it is, because it always helps me grow and helps me connect to myself, or just learn something new. Or it's just, to me, I always take the good with anything. It's always like a learning, growing experience.
Absolutely. I think a lot of what we've done too, in just about every interview that we have something specific that we get out of it that is a different point of view. That said, kind of with what way back at the beginning when you were talking about your trip to Russia and the fact that you had mentioned a lot of people think that the trip back is either closure or a new chapter. And that was something that I was like,
I've never thought about it like
I
that.
hadn't thought about that. And I'm also curious, like, what you view your trip as.
I always thought it was closure.
But it wasn't? It was a new chapter?
No, it's completely new. It opened so many new, I would say, wounds and kind of closed some of those wounds. I bandaged those up. I understood it a little bit better. But it's a lot when you do that reunion. And it's not always just, oh, that's perfect. Everything worked out perfectly. Even though I had a good story, I was able to find my birth mom. Some people aren't able to do that. It still was a new chapter and still is. I'm still trying to figure out, what do I do with all this information? What do I do with having her in my life now?
Which I think for me, like, when you and I can go back eventually, I guess I hadn't thought about it in the one way or another, because I think that is really the only ways you can kind of pose that. And I think people need to kind of start thinking about is, how do you view it ahead of time? What might you get out of it after the fact? And I think, like you said, it's going to be kind of a combination of the two, but I think a lot of people do think of it as just closure. I don't think a lot of people view it as, well, this is going to be a new chapter. I think a lot of people think of it as just closure, and I think that can kind of limit what you get out of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
If that makes sense.
I think it also, I think what I'm feeling on now is like the openness. I think with me, I was just so, oh my gosh, like willing for answers and connection and all these things, and just to remember my memories and go back to those places and revisit that, and just putting everything together. Like, I was so open to all of that I knew it was going to be a new chapter due to that openness. And I think in my opinion, I think a closed chapter is a safety net to some extent. But then you make through it, you then decide if you want it to be a new chapter, you know?
Very good point. And I also think with you being older, you understood a lot more. And so
absolutely.
I think that does play a role in it also. I was just going like, I don't know, what this even was. I guess let's open up and see what happens. But for you, it was like, were these memories I had real? Was this going to be validated when I go there? So I think it's, again, you went in it with a different perspective, but I love that view on it also because it is a brand new chapter.
Which, that said, validating doesn't always, it doesn't mean closure. No. It's like, especially I think with adoptees, that's kind of been our experience reading The Primal Wound, is it's validating, but it doesn't make it any less painful.
Yes.
Exactly. And that's something that I've always known is like, you can do all the work you can. I don't even know how to say this without sounding like negative or depressing, but it's like, the trauma is still trauma. It still happened. Still, a circumstance got us to the adoptee experience. And we can choose to view that as a beautiful journey to unfold and work on and heal. And I'm all about kind of breaking that generational trauma, because that's exactly what it is, and that's where it stemmed from. Or we can kind of suffer inside, and either way it hurts. It hurts either way, because circumstance you can't change.
Yes.
Yeah, that's my little rant.
So going back to I guess kind of your growing up and then just kind of discovering this kind of side of yourself as far as what adoption kind of means to you. How do you think, and this can be as broad or as specific as you'd like, and share as much as you're comfortable with, but how do you think that adoption has affected your mental health?
Oh yeah, I was looking over that before we did this. I was looking over the questions really quick. I love that question. I didn't realize my mental health until the pandemic hit. And that's when I started digging deeper, and obviously all of our lives slowed down. And I think a lot of adoptees grew closer to themselves and each other through the pandemic. And to some extent, I think that's a blessing. So that was when I started kind of doing that. Like, I've always been like a introspective, better, always bettering myself kind of person, but I didn't realize the mental health is a whole different level to it.
Mm-hmm.
And then once I started realizing that during the pandemic, I was like, there's a lot of work to be done here. So adoption has impacted my mental health and my whole life to every degree possible. But I also am careful within myself because I'm so introspective and I'm always digging deeper that I can overthink and overanalyze and overwhelm myself easily. But so I'm trying not to put not necessarily adoption as an excuse, but I'm trying not to put every experience or behavior or mannerism that I may have or challenges that I may have due to adoption. I'm trying to understand there's so many things that nurture, there's nature, biology, there's so many things that play in part within that experience. And outside forces and, all these things. And so it's definitely affected my mental health. And where I'm at now with that is just taking more stillness, like more time for myself, more self-care, more self-love, more stillness in my life. And really just choosing myself more and not saying, like, I was always a yes person before my journey started. And then I realized, I realized I was always kind of fitting in everywhere I went. And I was just socialite to everybody and known by everybody, doing everything all the time. And I would come home just really depleted. And I'm like, I just don't want to be that anymore. And since I went on this journey, it just kind of has been really fulfilling that internal side. So I don't know. Hopefully that sums up that question. Absolutely.
And I think we can totally agree with that. And I didn't even realize COVID kind of brought adoption more together, more that self-love. We just said this in our past interview. We're putting up those boundaries. We're trying to say no more often because we are yes people. I think as
a lot of adoptees are.
They're just, you're people pleasers. You just don't want anyone to feel bad or feel hurt because you've been hurt, your whole life.
The thing about the primal wound, the back of the book, I kind of read a little bit more about it. It's not just for adoptees, it's for anyone who's felt abandoned. And that's why I want to share my story. It's not just for adoptees. Obviously, that's the biggest connection, but it's, I want people to know, like, everyone has trauma in their life and in childhood, especially. We all are who we are as an adult due to our stemming from our childhood, and just breaking patterns within ourselves and, putting up those boundaries and like working, just self-work is really my main goal. And me telling my adoptee story and connecting to adoptees is how I'm doing it. But it's also challenging because on my Instagram and my following and just the industry that I'm in, I'd like to say that I'm trying to add that to the industry or kind of the world that I'm in here. But it also feels unbalanced sometimes because I don't want people to think that if they're not an adoptee, they can't connect or they can't relate.
We get that all the time.
I can relate to so many people, whether they're adopted or not. It's what you choose to view as a perspective and a story. If that makes sense. If all
yeah, totally.
I mean, it makes sense to us. I mean, when it comes to a lot of that too, it's just that I've had plenty of friends that have listened to our podcast that have said like, wow, I didn't realize how we were so similar, or that something like this, I really connect this with, they may just have kind of a family life that's kind of confusing, or, any kind of way. It doesn't really matter what exactly is going on as far as the abandonment specifically, as far as like what the specifics are. But so like there's that element. And then in regards to kind of what you said about, the pandemic and everything, I know Eric had mentioned that we're both people pleasers. We always were yes people. And I know for myself, it took me a really long time. I was in, theater constantly from like second grade until 5-ish years ago, and like choir and stuff. And like, I love that during school, but doing that outside of like having a job was just becoming really challenging with having to be so social all the time. And during the pandemic, I was like, oh no, I have to stay home and be alone. Rats, like, and people just kind of started to finally catch on that it was like, no, this is actually great, and having that time by myself. And like you said, a lot of adoptees, I think, had that time to connect to that. And obviously we still kept the podcast going during that time. And it's obviously been a very big growing experience for us. But yeah, I totally get what you mean when it's like, it's, forcing yourself to stop being a yes person all the time.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, like I kind of am, and I'm an extremist sometimes. I actually kind of noticed I was really closed off, and I started shutting everything down because I was so up here and I got too much in my mental state. So since I've been back from Russia, I've been trying to kind of push myself a little bit more to kind of get out more and see people and do things and whatever to a certain extent, but I still pretty much stilled my life. So yeah, the pandemic was good for that.
Right. It's kind of one of those things that everybody has at least one silver lining. And I don't think that that's bad to admit. I think it was good for a lot of people to slow down and, kind of see their life for what it really was and everything. So. Exactly. And I know some people too, I remember one person messaged me and was just like, I follow your journey. And I'm like, oh, like, how did you find me? And Alex, the founder of I'm Adopted, I'm like, how'd you find us? And she would, this person was like, I don't have the best relationship with my family. And I just think if you guys are doing the work, so much work to reconnect with your birth family that, there's abandonment, relinquishment there, and so much trauma there. And you guys are trying to do all this work, like that's inspiring and that's motivating for non-adoptees. And so it's like, it's just important that I don't know, I'm all about doing the work because you don't know who you're going to speak to and inspire, adoptee or non-adoptee. Absolutely.
Great point.
Yeah.
For sure.
Are you a part of any other groups besides that one?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook. I'm a part of like 2 Russian groups. So the support group for the for I'm Adopted Russian adoptees, and then another Russian adoptee group on there. I haven't really been too involved in them, but on Instagram, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Michelle Baby Be Brave.
We just started following.
I was going to say that seems relatively familiar.
She's a Romanian adoptee, and she we did an interview together too, and she just started having kind of advocates for her page and for her I guess organization, Baby Be Brave. So I just kind of became a little bit more a part of that. So I try to do what I can. I mean, for me, I'll be involved in anything as long as it's a positive impact and we get share our voices. It's really all it is just another platform to share more of yourself and your journey and advocate. And that's it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I guess for me, what advice would you have for other adoptees, kind of the similar background, age-wise, or people younger? What advice or experience would you kind of have them navigate through that or help them learn through that?
We all say, the ones that have always, gone through the journey, we all say, like, do it when you're ready. I'm all about breaking that fear. If you want something, break that fear. Because I wanted to do this my whole entire life, and I just never did it because life happens, and I just started numbing everything away. So if you want something bad enough, do it. When you're ready, do it. In my opinion, I think it's so important for all of us adoptees to try to connect to ourselves, the perspectives of all of the triad and our story. Connect to other adoptees, find support if you can through other adoptees. And I guess just be more open to future unfolding, and have faith. And what else? I feel like there's so much. I guess as a Russian adoptee, know that if you want to go back to Russia, every challenge, every case is going to be slightly different, and some more challenging than others, and some more time consuming than others. And you're going to need help. Don't do it on your, I don't recommend doing it just on your own. And yeah, I think that's
great advice. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. As far as kind of, I guess adoption overall, or just again, based on your experience, what are some things that you wish people would realize about adoption?
I feel like it's like a hidden secret. It's like something that's not talked about. And it should be talked about. But when it is talked about and those people have the curiosity and the openness to talk or to ask us questions, the conversation and dialogue should be not so, I don't know how to explain it, so in your face about it. So
blatant?
Yeah, so kind of blunt. Mm-hmm. It's a really delicate thing to talk about, and it's an unfolding type of conversation if we want to have that as adoptees. But adoption as a whole, it's a multi-layer thing, and it's it's a process, and I don't know, it's beautiful. I'm like pro healthy adoption. Mm-hmm. I'm definitely pro adoption, but I'm also like for prospective parents, I think there's so much work that they need to do within themselves first before adopting, because regardless, well, this is kind of like scattered, but how I view it is like as an adoptee, the adoptee already has trauma regardless of what the circumstance was exactly. So with the adopting family, and just because I've kind of experienced this within myself with the different families, and just by getting to know other adoptees, the prospective parents need to do the work beforehand and need to offer support for that adoptee as well, and understand that the adoption is going to impact them and it needs to be talked about. And not just fill a type of void within themselves, and not to view adoption as a last resort. Because that is all, in my opinion, it's all about energy, and that energy is already not very healthy. To make sure that you're giving as much nurture as you can to that child, and you understand that they're not the same blood. They may be a little different, and you may have to work around that.
Absolutely. I think a lot of that connects to what we've talked about in the past as well. We've, after a while with our podcast, originally it was very, I'm pro-adoption. Like, we felt a certain way about it because we've both had, generally positive experiences, again, despite the fact that we all come with trauma. But eventually we were like, okay, we've talked to some people that are also like really anti-adoption, or at least anti to international. It's very complicated, but we kind of talked about it. And we're kind of just said, we are neither pro nor anti-adoption. It is just the fact that adoption has a lot of changes that needs to be made. Basically, some of which being with adoptive parents, and just the fact that we say this all the time is just the fact that when your child arrives, the work is not done. That is not the end of the journey. And I think what can be,
oh my gosh.
Yeah, I think what can be so daunting is the fact that this time to adopt, and I mean, obviously your adoptive, family was about to give up, it's like it had taken so long that going further after that can be so, I don't think a lot of people think about that because they've already been through this much process to, adopt this child. And it doesn't seem like there should be a lot of work after that, but there is so much left to be done and to be understood, or at least attempt to understand that kind of thing, and just be able to connect with your child and make sure to nurture the things that are necessary, like you said, is just make sure to continue that and, do whatever you can to heal that trauma to whatever extent that's possible.
And also, I think for me, it's really big too, not to exploit any adoptee and not to like overshare when you adopted like a foreign baby or a child, or, I don't personally think that's okay, because you're already speaking for them and not giving them a voice whatsoever.
Oh yeah, for sure.
There's something else I was going to say, but I forgot. But yeah, definitely allowing the adoptee to find their voice and helping them through it.
Yes. Giving
them support. I forgot what else, but yeah.
Yeah, I think it's and like you said, kind of just, we always say we don't like that it's sometimes seen as a last resort. And I think that's often the way that it's posed in media, like just with, TV shows and stuff. That's often the way that it's posed, or at least that's the way it was when I was more growing up. And that's kind of my idea of it, was just, oh, this is last resort for everybody apparently. And that's just kind of a bummer,
I remember now, kind of that savior mentality, which it is. It's a gift and it's a blessing, and it is. But I think just understanding that there's so much contrast in the whole experience all around for everybody involved. So it's not just saving. It's also like with me, I did not feel saved leaving Russia. I felt I was leaving my whole life. I was leaving family behind. I was leaving my blood behind, my roots and all these things. And I, within that first family, I think it was a very kind of savior mentality, like just fit in, just do this, just do that. But I was really struggling. First of all, language barrier.
I'm sure.
And, I didn't even know English yet.
Wow.
And then once I learned English, I'm way too little to even express how I'm feeling, let alone talk about any of those things. So there's just so much, I guess what I can say now is love is not enough. There needs to be like some work done. There needs to be support. There needs to be a lot of nurture and patience too.
Yes, absolutely. I'm so excited for you to read this book, because everything you kind of touched on is in each of these chapters. So that's going to be really interesting to see your take on those and kind of how you felt after each chapter.
And that said, also with what you had mentioned about love isn't enough, and everything that have kind of become these almost key phrases with what we talk about, what we hear from, our interviews, is that I think it just really strengthens the fact that adoptive parents need to listen to the adoptee voices, because we're the ones who have been through it. We're the ones who are talking about it now. And, I think it should be, I guess I just feel like we should be listened to more now that we've all found our voice, and, making it so that it is a regular conversation, both for a resource for the adoptive parents as well as for the adoptees as they're growing up.
I also think as the adoptee is growing up, it's up to us at a certain point that we can connect more to ourselves, to the triad. We can do more work because we're older. And it kind of, in my case, kind of took that a little bit, because I was not that close with my family. And it just, there's things that I needed to work on within myself to connect more. And I, with some of these support chats and groups and stuff that I've kind of read some of these stories on, I think some adoptees, I'm not trying to talk bad or at all, but I think we tend to sometimes put blame on a lot of things due to our own perspective, but we're not doing anything about it. We can choose to do that. We can choose to have a better relationship. We can choose to have better dialogue, to go and discover ourselves more.
I think so too.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it does take a while. I think it's kind of a different coming of age, than a normal person, like in their teenage years or, whenever it might be. So I think that that's really important, that a lot of people need to discover. And, if that can be alongside us or you, that's always good. And we just always want to expand that community.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Well,
I think
do you have
that
any other
wraps it
questions?
up.
Yeah, I was going to
don't
say,
have
just
any.
if you want to let our listeners know where they can find you, the organizations you're part of, as well as the show that you're going to be featured on, take it away.
Yeah. So the show is called Reunited, and I'll be sharing more about that as that unfolds. And my Instagram, you guys can follow me on my Instagram. It's at DariaRottenberk, Daria Rottenberk. And yeah, I share a little bit more about myself there. And that's the main place that I share about my journey. And yeah, I'll come up. I don't know if you guys want to edit this out, but I'll come up with some photos because I realized I didn't talk too much about what I really did in Russia, but with all the memories and the places that I visited in Russia, I have some of those photos. So I would definitely love to share that on here.
Yeah.
Sweet. Yes, please do. And we'll definitely put a post up too. So if you have a specific photo of you in Russia, things like that you want, we can definitely do that.
And of course, when you, after the show and everything, we would love to do a part 2 with you so we can talk more about that trip specifically. So hopefully we can have Daria back for that.
Yeah, because that's, I'm somewhat, it's somewhat of a shell right now. I can't really talk about everything. But yeah, part 2 is like, I mean, it's a whole nother level to this.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think this was just a good way to kind of get to know you and just kind of know the background of it, especially prior to learning about your trip. This is the kind of stuff that's, I guess, the basics when it comes to an adoptee. So this is a good way to start. Definitely.
Thank you guys. Thank you guys for having me.
Yes.
Yeah, this was super fun. It was great to meet you. Everybody else who's listening, we were so lucky to be able to talk with Daria today, and we can't wait for a part 2. That said, please be sure to follow Colombian Influence on social media, COLOMBIAN. And if you would like to read along to Primal Wound with us, you can find those video podcasts on our YouTube channel, as well as just the audio versions, basically wherever podcasts can be found. So find us there. Always like, comment, subscribe, leave us ratings and reviews and comments on everywhere. So
and share us out.
Yes,
get
and
the word out.
You know.
Anybody, identity, who's suffering with identity, trauma, I mean, anything, not just adoption, not just Colombian adoptees.
We talked about, yeah.
Definitely just share it to anyone, because a lot of people can relate to this, and a lot of people can learn from our podcast and how to correctly talk with and understand more adoptees.
Absolutely. All right. Until next time.
Later.
Bye.